Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Falcons Central Radio Show on the Pro Football Central Radio Network. I am Aaron Freeman. I am joined, as always, by my co-host and buddy Scott Karasik. We are here to talk about the Atlanta Falcons. We are in a new year, the first show of 2015. We are going to be talking about the Falcons coaching search. We're going to be talking a little bit about the playoffs and how the Falcons can get back to the playoffs. And of course, at the end of the show, we'll be answering all your mailbag questions this week. But Scott, we are recording this on a Tuesday night. And a lot of the buzz is going on about Rex Ryan and the Falcons possibly hiring him. I guess we can talk about that a little bit later, but I'm sure people want to know, I guess, our quick thoughts on the possibility that a Rex Ryan hiring is imminent.
My guess is that you're not exactly a huge fan.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's
I personally think he's the third best candidate, but I also think Keith Armstrong's the best candidate. So what do I know?
okay. All right. Well, yeah. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But this is January. This is postseason. This is playoff time. We're looking at some of these playoff games on the weekends, and are we learning any lessons from what other teams are doing that could apply to the Falcons? How do you think the Falcons get back to the playoffs?
Prayer.
Okay.
No, honestly, they need offensive line to learn how to run block, which I think comes from. I think it comes from a. I think it comes from a lot of zone blocking scheme would help out a lot.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with you. I think they got a lot of lighter, athletic offensive linemen. Jake Matthews would be great in a zone blocking scheme. Joe Hawley could be great in a zone blocking scheme. John Asamoah has already proven that he's been great in a zone blocking scheme because that's what he did in Kansas City until Andy Reid showed up. I think Ryan Schrader could be great in a zone blocking scheme. The only question mark is Justin Blaylock, but Justin Blaylock's basically his contract is structured that there's probably very little chance that he's going to play beyond 2015. So this year is probably going to be his last year unless he plays absolutely great and they basically decide, hey, he's worth $8 million at age 32 or however old he'll be in 2016. But you if you're going to square peg anybody, it's probably Justin Blaylock. But if it's for a year, and it's not like Blaylock would be a terrible fit in his own blocking scheme. It's just he would not excel at it. He wouldn't be, I don't know, Wade Smith, or I can't think of anybody else who would be a great guard in his own blocking scheme, but you know what I'm talking about.
I mean, Justin Blaylock may not be ideal for his own blocking scheme, but he's still got enough quickness to look competent.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. So you can basically draft a guard or someone you can groom that could be a better fit there moving forward.
And I think you can get that in the fourth round, fifth round this year. There's a lot of good athletic offensive linemen. A lot of them.
Yeah, and the beauty of the zone blocking scheme is you don't have to get, you're not drafting guys like Mike Iupati, who are these big 330-pound guys that you just want to move dudes off the ball. And so, that's one of the hallmarks of why, when we had Alex Gibbs, I'm sorry, back in the day and with Denver, when he was there, they would always, draft these later round guys, because there wasn't a premium on the sort of, smaller, quicker zone blocking type players. And, that doesn't exist as much as it did in the 90s, but it certainly still applies today. You can kind of get away with a fourth round pick in a zone blocking scheme is like a second round pick in another scheme.
I'm going to throw a ridiculous name out there right now. His name is Miles Diffenbach from Penn State.
Okay.
And he's played left guard in a very zone-heavy scheme up in College Station, or I guess it's College Station, but up in Penn State. I'm a big fan of Diffenbach. I think he'd be a good fit for Atlanta. Um, the other option is if you do want to spend a late first round or early second round pick on an offensive lineman, and you get a guy like Cedric Aboye, why not put him inside at left guard and have Matthews and Aboye? Because he played guard in college.
Hmm.
He played left guard next to Luke Jekyll.
Hmm.
So I don't see why he couldn't play left guard next to Jake Matthews. And chemistry wouldn't be as tough to work out there because you already know the guy. And then you can cut Justin Blaylock and take that $6 million that he's making and spend it on, combine it with some cash from Sam Baker, and spend it on a guy like Ndamukong Suh. But I digress. That's my dream. That's my dream. If only I was GM and I could go fast and loose with all this money.
It's an understandable dream.
It's a
Yeah.
very understandable dream. Or even like a
Yeah.
Cameron Irving early in the draft. I like him because he's that 6'5", 310, super quick, can play all five line positions, but he's a solid inside guy more than he's an outside guy.
Hmm.
And at
Definitely.
center, he's smart. He understands protections. So you put him next to Hawley and Matthews, and I think you've got a left side that'll protect Ryan for a long time. And then on the right side, I'm a big fan of Asamoah and Schrader. I don't
Hmm.
know your thoughts on Schrader, but I thought for at least 8 games this year, he looked like a skinny Tyson Clabo.
I like Schrader. I thought I've always liked his run blocking. I've always liked his mean streak. I've always liked his athleticism. It was kind of getting his technique in his hands to the point where he could be competent in pass protection. I thought he did that for the most part. He still has some lapses here and there, but he's in his second year. He's only played 5 years of organized football, so it's going to take some refining with him. But I do think with continued coaching, especially if Mike Tice and Wade Harmon stick around for a little bit, then you know, the arrow was pointing up on Schrader. So I don't really have any issues with Schrader moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, exactly my point. That's what I'm saying. Like, if you're going to take a guy that early, and it's a guy like Cedric Boye, you can put him at left guard. I'd be okay with that if you move to his own scheme. Because then you've got a bunch of guys that are 305 to 310 pounds, 6'3" to 6'7", that are just quick, good athletes off the ball and destroying people. Your worst run blocker on that line would be Asamoah,
Okay. Yeah. Uh,
which that's a good situation.
yeah. 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 That is a very good situation. So it sounds like you think the Falcons getting a little bit more balance back in their offense will help them get back to the playoffs.
By a little bit more balance, you mean 1,800 rushing yards? Yeah,
Okay. All right. Just a smidge.
just a smidge.
Yeah.
Not asking for much, just a little bit of rushing yards. Uh,
It'll be nice to have a 100-yard rusher more than one game a year, and not because he broke a 50-yard run.
I mean, and the thing is, I'm asking for 1,800 rushing yards because that would put them in the top 15. That
Yeah.
puts them 300 yards more than what they had, and still average 4 yards a carry, but 4 or more yards per carry. But I think that's what they need.
And if they can run the ball a little bit more effectively, then it probably means the defense isn't on the field as much.
Now
And
you're understanding me.
yeah,
Now you're really understanding me. The defense can't give up 6,300 yards if it's not on the field for, what is it? Let's see how many plays they had. They had 566 passing plays against it, and they had 450 rushing plays. Atlanta had the most plays run on it this year outside of maybe two other teams.
but there you go. So I think people are like, why are you guys talking about the offensive line and running the football? Everybody knows that the Falcons' defense has to be improved, but I think that goes without saying. So how do you think, what areas do you think the Falcons need to focus on most to get their defense back to a semi-competent level, if not good?
A pass rusher, and there's quite a few available in free agency. I know who your favorite is because you got an all pit everything view on the off season,
Yeah,
and I'm okay with that. I would be perfectly okay if Jabal Sheard came in and was one of the guys Atlanta signed this offseason. Get him, get Sue, destroy people. I'm down with that.
okay,
But you do need better, stronger schemes too. You
okay.
do need to actually play guys in the right spot. And I know you keep saying, oh, it's not about doing that, it's about the talent. Well, if the talent isn't in the right role, the talent can't succeed to the most of its ability.
It's true.
And if you're
Um,
not letting guys reach their potential, you don't know what you really have.
okay, I agree with that. I do think, if you have if you're talented, then it really doesn't matter what scheme, what role you're used in. John Abraham isn't struggling in any role. Maybe if he's dropping in coverage, but pretty much you just say, go get the quarterback, John. I think, that's more what I'm talking about, those types of guys.
I think Abraham's issue right now is more health than anything else.
Yeah, yeah, but I'm talking about like 2010 John Abraham.
Oh,
That
yeah.
was,
Well, I'm also looking at it this way. You can't say that guys are bad when the coaches seem to think that Croy Bierman is the best defensive player on the team.
okay.
Is that a fair assessment?
Well, to be fair to Corey Bierman, the last 8 or so games, he was probably one of the better defenders on the team. First 8 or so games, no, that definitely was not the case. But
Maybe the last 8 games, but the first 8 games, he was terrible.
that's true.
He was arguably one of the worst 43 defensive ends in the league. And I'm calling him that because there's no way in hell you can consider that scheme that Atlanta ran last year anything but a 4-2-5. So they ran a four-man defensive line. And it was terrible. It was absolutely garbage.
Okay. Yeah. I think where I stand on that. I think when you think players like Tyson Jackson and Paul Soley are worth the money that we paid them, then there's a disconnect in the brain, I guess, of the decision makers in Atlanta.
Well,
So
I thought Soliai was worth it. I didn't think Jackson was worth it.
yeah, I didn't think Soley was worth his contract. At least he's a decent player, but to me, given the two down player that is at best going to play 45% of your plays, $30 million, and the declining two down player, that just to me just didn't make any sense.
Let's just put it this way. Had they gone with the guy I suggested, or the two guys I suggested over what they actually got, the coaching staff would probably still be here. I was suggesting Linval Joseph,
Okay.
who was excellent in Minnesota, showed he was a three-down guy, played more snaps there than Jonathan Babineau played in Atlanta, had 5 sacks on the interior of a defensive line, was destroying people against the run, held up extremely well when he was forced to do anything, basically. Like he was, hey, go out there and get double teamed every play, and he was still destroying the double team. That was one guy I wanted. The other guy, not so much, Michael Johnson. But I feel like if you gave Michael Johnson a 5-year, $25 million contract, it's at least forgivable. It's at
Yeah.
least a point where you're like, well, at least they're trying to get a pass rush. And, at least Joseph and, then you have Joseph and Babineau inside, and you're like, well, at least they got the inside guys and Peters rotating in and Hageman learning and you know if you have a 3-4 or yeah 3-man defensive line, you've got Corey Peters and Linval Joseph and John Babineau or Goodman instead of Babineau on rundowns. Like it looks better, and Mike Nolan doesn't look like as much of an idiot if that group is in.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
just thought it was redundant.
my guy was Lamar Houston. He did have a great year in Chicago, but who did have a great year in Chicago? So, um, he was one of the better players. But oh well,
I
can't cry.
remember saying I was open to that.
Yeah, when you're one of two good players on Oakland, it usually means you're pretty good. Khalil Mack would get that distinction. So, it usually means if you can shine in Oakland, then you're probably a good football player.
Yeah, and Khalil Mack is a monster.
Yeah. So, Scott, do you want to start talking about these coaches? I know people are waiting with bated breath so that we can get into this coaching search.
We should probably do that.
All right. Before we get to Rex Ryan talk, we had a couple of interviews in the last week since we did the show. Adam Gase and Dan Quinn interviewed last week. Josh McDaniels interviewed last week. But, you mentioned him at the top of the show. I guess he's an under-the-radar sort of interviewee, but Keith Armstrong got an interview on Sunday. What are your thoughts on that?
On Keith Armstrong, I think he's
Yeah.
I think he's the right coach. I think he's the one that's proves. I think Keith Armstrong has proven he deserves the job. And people may not like the idea of a special teams coordinator who doesn't have experience on offense or defense or any of that. But a special teams guy has to touch every player on the entire roster every game. Everybody has to have interactions with Keith Armstrong, except maybe Matt Ryan and the backup quarterbacks. But other than those guys, other than the quarterbacks, you're talking 50 players that say, oh, hey, Keith, what's my role this down? What do I have to do here? And if it's a guy breaking into the league, oh, hey, what am I supposed to do here? Even starting offensive linemen will sit there and go, oh, what's my role on this play? I know I've got to go in there for pass blocking because we've got 7 active offensive linemen every game. Or not pass blocking, for field goal, protection. What am I supposed to do here? So every player works on special teams. Every player knows who Keith Armstrong is. Every player will gladly play their hearts out for Keith Armstrong. And he's not afraid to call players on their bullshit. As we saw during Hard Knocks, my favorite quote, and I think it's everybody's favorite quote, you're not good enough to be this much of an asshole. And he said it to one of maybe not your favorite player, but one of most Falcons fans this year's favorite player because he was the best pass rusher we had in Jonathan Massaquoi. That's who he said it to. And I hate to say it this way, but that's the perfect thing you got to say to a guy like that. You got to light a fire under him. And I do think that with the special teams coordinator, that guys earn their roles. It becomes more of a meritocracy, where it's, oh, hey, you were good on special teams. Let's get you a couple more snaps on defense, see how you do. Oh, you did well in those couple of snaps. Let's give you some more snaps. Oh, hey, we've got a real weakness here at inside linebacker, but you showed to be the only guy that's decent in coverage, so let's try you out here. I think with that kind of situation, you might have guys like Marcus Sproul, guys you would never expect to actually look good, wind up as starting NFL linebackers looking decent in a scheme. The only real question with Keith Armstrong is what the hell is he going to bring in for his coordinators?
Well, Scott, I don't know if you can still keep Armstrong short because he did coach offense and defense. He played running back at Temple, played some defensive back at Temple. He coached the Falcons secondary from '94 to '96, and I think he coached wide receivers at Akron back when he was still like a young hotshot graduate assistant type or whatever. But so he does have a little bit of experience coaching both sides of the ball. But you're right about his coordinators. I have no idea who he would bring in or any of that. So that would probably make or break him as a coach.
Oh, I wasn't saying that he wasn't a good coach for offense or defense. I'm just saying he has no coordinator experience.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'm sorry.
Coach experience. He knows the game of football. It's not the first time he interviewed for a head coaching job. And those other interviews weren't just Rooney Rule deals either. Those other interviews that he went in for were legitimate shots at coaching jobs. Yeah, it was the Browns. Yeah, it was the Bills. But still, legitimate shots at coaching jobs.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if and when he gets a job. I don't think it's going to be in Atlanta, but if he does eventually get a job somewhere, head coaching job, who he'd target as his offensive and defensive coordinator. I'd be curious to see what type of schemes that Keith Armstrong wants to run.
As long as he's aggressive, as long as he is more than willing to put some blitzes out there and help protect his secondary, as long as he's more than willing to rush 4 at a minimum on every down. Again, this is why I like Terrell Austin. I did a breakdown on Terrell Austin film. He rushed 3 men, a total of 2% of his plays this year. He rushed 4 men on, this is just every single down. He rushed 4 men on passing plays, a total of 42%, which when you've got the guys he's got, that's fair. Because, you got Ndamukong Suh, you got Ziggy Ansah, you got Nick Fairley, and you got a solid guy on the other side in George Johnson. And that was normally his 4-man group, and they were creating havoc. So when you've got those 4 guys, you can drop 7 in coverage and destroy teams that way. Basically what Carolina did to Atlanta.
Yeah.
So I'm cool with that. Now, when he couldn't get pressure with those guys, he didn't hesitate to bring 5, 6, sometimes even 7 guys and blow plays up. And he didn't just run 1 or 2 different kinds of blitz plays. He brought pressure everywhere. Brought it from linebackers, brought it from corners, brought it from safeties. Ran so many different schemes on the interior that it was fun to watch. He ran overload to the left side one play, overload to the right the next. It's a fun, multifaceted scheme. It reminded me a lot of Jim Johnson's defense back with the mid-2000s Eagles.
Okay. Yeah.
And
I know.
that's a great defense.
It is.
And then the coverages was mainly press on the outside when they were in man, which, again, between Robert Alford and Desmond Trufant, I'd love to see him play more press because I think that helps your pass rush.
Mm-hmm. It does.
Because when you jam the guys at the line, they're not going to be as open as much.
Throws off the offense, yeah.
Throws off any sort of timing-based offense. And then when he wasn't in press man, he was in matchup zone, which, again, that's what the Falcons need to run a lot of. Now, they ran a lot of matchup zone with Mike Nolan, and they did very well with it. So take a strength that you've already got in matchup zone and add press man to it. It's not going to hurt.
Okay. I was not fond of seeing the Falcons in zone. It seemed like they were giving up big plays. It seemed like they always go to the zone in 3rd and longs and then first down every time. But hey, if you have a coach that can at least get these guys to be in the right spot, then why not? Scott, another interview happened yesterday. Doug Marrone. Do you think he has a shot to get the job?
He got an interview, but that's all he should get.
Okay.
I think Doug Marrone is a horrible, horrible, horrible head coach. I think the only reason why the Bills turned around this year was because of Jim Schwartz, not because of Doug Marrone.
Okay.
The same thought on Doug Marrone is the same thought I have on Josh McDaniels. 6 in one, half dozen in the other. Same coach. Great offensive coordinator, terrible, terrible head coach.
Okay. And based off the stuff I've been reading lately from out of New York, it's hard to dispute that. So yeah.
Now the big question, Rex Ryan. Everybody's talking about him. He interviewed today. He left without a contract, is what's popping up on the timeline. I'm okay with that because I still think he's in the running. Let's put it this way. You don't interview for 5 hours if there's not mutual interest and you're not in the running.
Definitely.
But I do think that Atlanta's going to bring in Terrell Austin. I do think they're going to bring in Todd Bowles and interview both of those guys too.
Yeah. Arthur Blank is not one for knee-jerk reactions, and I think when he scheduled those guys to be interviewed later this week, I think Austin's on Wednesday and Todd Bowles is on Thursday. I might have them backwards. But, yeah, I think his plan all along was I'm going to interview all these guys. Because 5 hours with Rex Ryan, what if the Terrell Austin interview goes 6 hours? What if the Todd Bowles, anything can happen. So you got to be thorough in your process.
What if all three of those interviews go 5 hours and Marrone's interview was 2 hours, Josh McDaniels' interview was 5 minutes? Oh, Tim Tebow? Okay, bye. Like that's basically it. And then Keith Armstrong probably had a pretty long interview too, because it's not like how to put this? It's not like he doesn't know the team very well.
Mm-hmm.
Because they could go, well, Keith, you're on the inside. You know every single player. What are the schemes we need to run? Boom. Because Keith might say, you know what, hey, we got to run a 3-4 defense with this kind of scheme, and we got to blitz more, we got to run press, and we got to do this, we got to do this. And they might really like Keith Armstrong. But because it's an internal candidate, we have no idea what's going on. And that's just the way they want
it. Yeah. I think they're going to get some of these guys back for a second interview. I think that's usually how the process goes with the Falcons. Unless they're trying to sneak a guy like Bobby Petrino, they're always going to interview you twice. I don't know what happens in that second interview, but it seems important, whatever happens in there. So I do think there's a good chance to see Rex Ryan and Bowles and Austin maybe, and then maybe either Gase or Quinn, depending on if either of their teams get bounced out of the playoffs this weekend. I don't think we'll see McDaniels and Marrone for a second interview, but we'll see what happens. And I think probably by the end of next week we'll know who the coach is. But it did seem like at least for the last hour or two that it was possible that we would know who the coach was by the end of tonight. So things are heating up at least.
Definitely. Yeah. We're seeing a completely different, how to put this, we're seeing a completely different situation than what happened last time. Because last time it was like, oh, there's 3 candidates, oh, there's 1 interview each, oh, they're done. And that's how they wound up with Mike Smith. Because it was like Mike Smith, Rex Ryan, and I forget the third one.
Leslie Frazier.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, and then Rex Ryan, who I really liked at the time. I think had they gotten Rex Ryan in the first place, it might have been a completely different situation.
It's fair to say.
I still think they take Matt Ryan high because I think that was a Dimitroff move. I think that was Dimitroff saying, we need a franchise quarterback. I don't give a crap what you think, Mike Smith. And Mike was probably like, okay. Because he comes off like a yes man.
Yeah, I do remember the debate of back in the day. This is old school for some of y'all, but Glenn Dorsey versus Matt Ryan, and it was like, oh, Mike Smith's a defensive coach. He's gonna want to get Glenn Dorsey, who people mistakenly thought at the time And hindsight clearly shows that we were all wrong. But was the next Warren Sapp. Um, they made the right choice with Matt Ryan.
He turned out to be the first Parade Jerry.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think that's a slight to Glenn Dorsey to compare him to Parade Jerry.
I don't know, man. Look at their career numbers.
Glenn Dorsey's still in the league, though.
Yeah, but Glenn Dorsey is now just turning 29. Parade Jerry was 31 when he retired this offseason. And Glenn Dorsey's not in the league. He didn't play at all this year.
Yeah, because he was hurt. But he's still under contract with the 49ers.
Oh, is he?
I don't think they cut him.
Parade Jerry might have more career sacks.
Well, Glenn Dorsey's a much, much better run stopper.
No, they're about the same. Parade Jerry in 5 years has 5.5 sacks. Glenn Dorsey in 6 had 6 sacks. No, I think I said it right. He's the first Parade Jerry.
No, that's just being mean to Glenn Dorsey. He's not that bad. At least he started in the NFL, unlike Parade Jerry.
That's true, but it's not like Parade really deserved to start in the NFL.
Dorsey started on good defenses, Kansas City and San Francisco, so he had that going for him. Parade Jerry can't even start the Falcons, so.
All right, so we've got another question here on Todd Bowles as the top assistant. And I think he's the guy you should get if you're not going to promote Keith Armstrong from within. Bring in Todd Bowles. Because at least Todd Bowles will keep Keith Armstrong as a special teams coordinator.
Yeah, didn't they work together in Miami?
They worked together in Miami, and they were best friends, or maybe not best friends, but they played on the team together at Temple.
Okay, yeah, okay.
So Bowles will be like, hey, man, stick around. You know you got this job. And I'm pretty sure Bowles would probably try and keep Dirk Cutter, which you may not love, but I think Mike Smith's hand in both the defense and the offense had Dirk Cutter's offense looking the worst it ever had, and Mike Nolan's defense looking the worst it ever had. You can't blame it all on Smith, or not on Smith, on the coordinators. Now, I do think Bowles saying, "Hey, let's attack every single play," would completely change the team.
Well, realizing that Keith Armstrong and Todd Bowles went to school together makes me put new context in the Keith Armstrong interview. Makes me think maybe they were trying to get some info on Todd Bowles. Because I do think Todd Bowles, if I'm placing bets, I'm betting on Todd Bowles being the next Falcons coach, not Rex Ryan. That's me. But I think, yeah, I just think everything I've heard about Todd Bowles makes me think that Thursday we're going to hear about how wonderful that interview went with him and Arthur Blank. So,
hey, all I'm saying is keep Keith Armstrong here. He's put in his time in Atlanta for me to just say keep him. Like, no matter what, keep him. Because he's put 10 of his 27 years coaching here in Atlanta. Let him retire here. Let him be special teams coordinator for life. I just really like Keith Armstrong. He's the kind of coach that I want to go play for.
Scott, I got a question for you. Since Todd Bowles and Mike Nolan worked together in multiple places, Miami, I think the Jets as well, maybe Washington too, I can't recall. Do you think that means that there's a good chance that Mike Nolan is still the defensive coordinator of the Falcons next year?
It's possible, but I think that he would take less of a role.
Okay.
I think that, and again, nothing against Mike Nolan, but I think it's past his time with this group of guys for him to be the main one deciding playing time schemes, all that.
Okay.
Todd Bowles, if you're not going to go with Armstrong, Bowles is the best candidate by far. Good defensive coordinator. Understands multiple different spots. Obviously, he worked mainly with secondary, but he knows a lot about the different spots.
You talked about him keeping Dirk Cutter, and I think there's probably a good possibility that if the Falcons, regardless of who they hire, if they end up with a defensive coach, I think there's a good chance that Dirk Cutter is going to stay just because, they'll probably look at the Falcons as well. If it ain't that broke, so we'll just keep some continuity for Matt Ryan and whatnot. Because I think they still finish, despite all the criticism for Dirk Cutter, I think they still finished as a top 10 offense this year.
Mm-hmm.
But if we do hire Todd Bowles, I would love to see him bring in somebody that could bring in, that Bruce Arians offense. That's the type of offense I like to see. Offense that's not afraid to, chuck it up deep, especially with Julio. That would just be amazing to me. But hey, a man can
Yeah.
dream.
They had the eighth best yardage offense per game. They had the fifth best passing yardage offense. They need to improve the rushing offense. And they need to score some more points, but they were still top 12 in points scored. So they've got the ability to have a much better offense. I think if the offensive line didn't kind of tank and have 5 guys on injured reserve, the offense would have scored 28, 29 points a game.
One of the things I'd like to see is I'd like to see them get a lot younger at the skill positions. Obviously, they have some youth there, but get some quality players, kind of like just have like Matt Ryan, groom a bunch of young, good players at wide receiver and tight end and running back that can kind of grow with Matt Ryan over these last couple of years, and hopefully can bring back what we kind of had in the earlier days of Matt Ryan when he was surrounded by veterans. But that's what I would kind of like to see, and I think that would help the offense a lot too.
So would you be open to a guy like, I don't know, Devontae Freeman as the lead back with St. John Days as a power back, and then Antone Smith as the third guy?
Maybe. I would rather see Devontae take over Quiz's role and have somebody else be that lead back, but
I like St. John Days. I think he's a great back who never really got a shot in college. And when he did, he ran all over Mississippi State.
yeah.
I think you could get him in the 6th or the 7th round and have the next Alfred Morris.
Well, I think this is a pretty deep running back class from what I've seen. And you got guys like obviously Gurley's headliner, Gordon's headliner, Amir Abdullah, Jay Ajayi, Tevin Campbell. I really like Duke Johnson from Miami. I really feel like the Falcons, could get one of those lead backs, one of those feature guys, and have a guy that could be Le'Veon Bell-esque, a year or two down the road if they draft one of those guys on the first day or second day. Sorry, not the first day. Second day of the draft. So we'll see what happens.
I agree that you can get somebody in the 2nd or the 3rd day, but I'd rather just take a guy in the 6th and a guy in the 7th and say, you know what, Battle Royale. There's a lot of teams out there that do very well with a bunch of undrafted guys.
It's true.
Specifically looking at one who we tend to hate.
Oh, you talking about? I know what you. It took me a second to
Talking
figure.
about our little brothers from our sister city in New Orleans.
Yeah, they do seem to hit on undrafted guys all the time.
They had 1,800 yards rushing this year. Led by, they had Mark Ingram. But they also had Kerry Robinson, Pierre Thomas, and Tavares Cadet. Not a single one of those last 3 names were drafted.
Don't forget Chris Ivory a couple of years ago.
And that's who I compare St. John Days to.
Yeah.
So I'm saying spend a 7th round pick on a guy like that. Spend
Okay.
another seventh round pick on a guy like a Pierre Thomas. Or, I don't know, see if Jerome Smith can be the Pierre Thomas. Or Jason Snelling. I don't see much difference between the three guys.
Okay. All right. So, Scott, before we get into this mailbag questions, another guy that's been rumored to be a candidate is Hugh Jackson. There has been no, confirmation that he's going to get an interview. But what are your thoughts on Hugh Jackson being a candidate?
I've said that Hugh Jackson should always get a shot. However, he and Arthur Blank may not have left on the best terms. So I don't think he ends up in Atlanta. But I do think wherever he ends up, he'll be a good coach.
Okay. Yeah, I think honestly, if I'm being honest, I think he'd probably be my top choice. I liked what he did in Oakland. I like that he's a little brash. That's one of the reasons why people like Rex Ryan. I like that he's an offensive coach. I like that he's an offensive coach that, understands passing, but also preaches, balance and running success. I like that I think he's coached quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers throughout his career.
Yep.
And I like that when a coach has been all over the offense, that usually means he has a well-rounded offense.
He also
So
coached defensive backs for a year.
there you go. So you know, I think he'd be a great candidate if he got a shot, but it may not happen. So, but a guy can dream, right? You got the Indomitian Suit dream. I got the Hugh Jackson dream, I guess, and the all pit everything off season dream.
Well, the all pit everything offseason still has some realism to it.
Okay. Thank
Maybe
you
not
for.
Terrell Revis, but everything else about it.
Well, if we get Rex Ryan, I think the Revis possibility opens up. I don't know if we'd still get him, but it'd at least be a little bit more plausible.
Maybe. Maybe. I'm not a. I've heard rumors of friction there, but it could have also been friction with the GM and not really the head coach.
That's what I've heard. I've heard it was mostly Revis wanted to get paid, and if it would was up to Rex Ryan, he would have paid him, but it wasn't up to Rex Ryan. And I think when it comes down to money, I don't think money is an object for Arthur Blank if he thinks it's the right move. And who wouldn't think signing Darrell Revis is the right move?
Man, with you run nickel every play. You have to put the best players on the field, but you'd have Revis, Trufant, and Alford out there every play, and Alford could learn how to develop. Alford played a lot of nickel in college, and that's why he wound up as high as he did. I don't know why Atlanta never played him in nickel in the pros, but he would have been much better there.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So you want to get in these mailbag questions?
Probably should.
All right. Our good friend, a box of cookies, Devontae Hughes. Do you think Rex would maximize the young talent on defense?
In a word, yes. I'll
Well,
expand on it a little bit more because I think that Massaquoi, Hageman, I think a lot of these guys would have much better roles. I think he would. Let's put it this way: I think Mapanga and Massaquoi are better players for a Rex Ryan style scheme than a Mike Nolan style scheme. Because a Rex Ryan style scheme drops them into coverage 50 to 100 snaps a year. A Mike Nolan style scheme drops them into coverage probably closer to 200 to 250 times a year. So it's, hey, go pin your ears back, go set the edge, and go destroy a quarterback. I think that's much better for those guys. As far as Hageman, I think Hageman would do great in Muhammad Wilkerson's role. I think that was the role that Mike Nolan was imagining him in when they drafted him. And then Soliai would be perfect for that middle. And I do think Warlow would probably be used a lot better because he's not a coverage linebacker. And Mike Nolan continually dropped him, 10 to 15 yards deep in coverage, and that's not his game. He's not a 10 to 15 yards deep kind of guy. He's a drop me 5 or rush after the quarterback kind of guy. So I think it would help out a lot. And I do think Rex, because he preaches more of a one-gapping style scheme, would be better off for Atlanta than a full-on two-gap, the way that Mike Nolan is.
Okay. My answer to this is the snarky comment. What young talent? No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I think Rex would help out a lot, but I think he would need a lot more to work with moving forward than what the
You got a
Falcons.
number 8 overall pick you can use.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that the Falcons could do a little bit better job than they did last year with the defensive talent in the draft, but we'll see. Andrew Schauweiler. I can't even say it. I never can say his name. But he asks, with knowing that Rex's meeting went 4 hours long after the team interviews Bowles, do you think it's over and Rex is automatic head coach if Bowles even gets a chance?
Um, I don't think it matters. I think that having a long interview is doing due diligence no matter what it is. I think they should give Bowles a 4-hour interview. I think they should give Terrell Austin a 4-hour interview. I think if you're not giving your coach at least a couple hours worth of an interview, you have no idea what you're doing.
I would say, who wouldn't want to spend 4 hours with Rex Ryan? Seems like he's a fun guy to hang out with. So, yeah, I don't think
He
his
is a,
4 hours.
he is one of Buddy Ryan's kids, man.
Yeah. So, I don't think, his long interview probably does mean that, Arthur Blank does want him as the coach, but that doesn't mean you know, he's the job is his. But yeah. All right. Charlie Plummer asks, if Rex is hired, do we have a legit shot at Sue, Revis, and the rest of the premier defensive talent? I'm assuming he's talking about free agency.
Atlanta has $30 million in cap space right now. That's before cutting Steven Jackson. That's before potentially cutting Sam Baker. Atlanta has more than enough money to go out and get whoever the hell they want. I don't think whether Rex is here or not, I think if they show people the money, that's going to be more important than anything else.
Yeah. We've said it before in the show. Sue is not going to take a penny less than $99 million, or at least I said it before the show. So basically, if you're like, hey, Ndamukong Suh, here's $110 million, it's like, sure, I will take that money and go play for whoever wants to pay me that money. I mean, who in the right mind would pass up $100 million to come play for the Falcons or really any team? I'd play for, I don't even the Jaguars if they were going to pay me $100 million.
Let's be honest here. I'd play for the Saints if they gave me $100 million.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
like I would, say who dat all the time. If they paid me $100 million, man. Royalty's not cheap, but that ain't cheap at all. That's $100 million, man.
Yeah. I mean, as I said earlier, I think if we got Rex, I think the chances that we got Revis would go up. I don't know if we would be the front runners for Revis or anything. I think probably New England is probably still going to be the front runner for Revis. I mean, who wouldn't want to play for the Patriots? But
Man, it's cold up there.
you got a shot at winning Super Bowls up there.
Yeah, but it's cold as shit. I don't want to play in New England. Screw that.
Mm-hmm.
I hate the snow. I mean, yeah, you can win Super Bowls, but you can win Super Bowls with any team if you've got the right coaching and chemistry. So I'm not really worried about that.
Yeah, I think they got the right coaching and the right chemistry up there, though.
That's true, they do.
I think they're doing okay. Yeah. Brandon Bedient. Can't even say his Twitter handle. 837. Okay, whatever. Can head coaches regress? What causes coaches to get worse outside of players changing?
Yes, they can regress. Mike Smith is a great example. And it wasn't just players changing. It was him being stubborn and not changing his schemes. It was him trying to run the same scheme they ran in 2012 without the right personnel from 2012. It was him trying to run a 4-2-5 when they had 3-4 personnel. It was him trying to run the wrong scheme on base downs. Oh, hey, let's run a nickel against a basic I form. What's going to win? Every time the I form.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even need more knowledge than Madden to know that one. Any competent NFL coaching staff would go, oh, hey, the Falcons line up in nickel. Let's line up in the I form every single play. I mean, just outthinking yourself is what causes you to regress. Play your guys in the best spot. Don't overthink it. Keep your schemes simple but effective, and go from there.
I'd also say, messages kind of get stale after a while, especially if you don't have the hardware to back it up. I don't know what the sort of timetable is, but, whether it's 4 years, 5 years, 7 years, 9 years, whatever. But it's kind of hard to, I guess, practice what somebody's preaching to you if you don't have sort of, basically Super Bowls to sort of be like, yeah, this is why it works. So I think, after a while things can get kind of stale, and I think, they certainly kind of got stale in Atlanta. Particularly, once the losing starts, it seemed to snowball the last 2 years, and the Falcons just couldn't get out of it. And, quicksand, basically.
I do think the second half of 2014 was better. They went
Yeah,
5-3.
that's true. That's true. But those 5 losses in the middle of the season, it just seemed like they just could not get out of that rut. They needed that bye came at the perfect time.
It really did. Although Mike Smith, if there was any better clock management there from him, Detroit, Cleveland, hell, even if they can hold on to a lead in New York and run the ball out, they're a 9-7 team this year with this talent. So it wasn't all on. I put more of it on Mike Smith than I put on the actual talent, the actual players.
Okay. Well, we've beaten that horse to death this year. So we'll be talking about next year. We'll be talking about Rex Ryan's coaching versus talent, or Todd Bowles' coaching versus talent. But yeah, at
We'll
Vin
talk
Cruz.
about the playoffs.
Yeah, that's probably what we'll be talking about. At Vin Cruz asks, "What is the first thing you think our new coach would do in terms of personnel?"
I think he'd look at the personnel and go, God damn, get me a pass rusher. Get me someone to go after the quarterback and just destroy him. That's what I need. I need a pass rusher. I need like 3 of them off the edge. And if you can get that Sue guy from Detroit, I'd love to have him.
Yeah, I think probably the first move you'll see is they'll cut some dead weight. I think you'll see Sam Baker go with the post June 1 cut. I think there's a possibility that either Tyson Jackson or Paul Soliai could also go. You get 2. I think it's 2 post June 1 cuts that you can make at the beginning of an off season, and Baker's probably like 99% chance he's going to be one. And then depending on sort of what sort of scheme, who gets hired and what sort of scheme he wants to run, I think there's a chance that Jackson or Soliai could go. Jackson's probably the likelihood because at least Soliai has shown that he can play in a 4-3 when he, this last year in Miami they were a 4-3. And, even as a 2-down player, he can still give you value there. Jackson clearly showed it as a 4-3 defensive tackle. He was terrible this year. And, Steven Jackson's probably going to get cut. I think Jonathan Babineau is probably on the bubble. I think if we hire a 4-3 coach, I think there's a higher chance that Babineau stays. But if we go back to a 3-4, then, there's a decent chance that he'll get cut. Am I missing anybody else that's on the bubble?
Yeah, I don't think Babineau gets cut. I don't think his contract's big enough to warrant a cut.
I hope not. I hope not. But I do think, someone might look at him and say, hey, he's making, what, 3.6 million this year. He's 33 years old. I can get a younger, cheaper player to do what he's going to do.
I think they're also going to look at it and go, he's one of Atlanta's like two good pass rushers right now, and I can't afford to lose a decent pass rusher. I'm not going to play him 700 snaps,
Okay. Right.
but I'll keep him on the roster. He's worth keeping on the roster.
Hey, I think that, but,
I think you play him as a three tech in rotation and nickel sets and dime sets. I think that's his role moving forward. I think no matter who the coach is, that's Babineau's role moving forward. And I think he would relish that role because he'd be fresh, and I think he'd be dominant as a rotational three technique, just get after the quarterback. Basically what OC was, but on the inside.
I agree. But, I'm not 100% confident that that'll happen. But I think Harry Douglas is on the bubble, but I doubt they cut him just because their depth at wide receiver isn't great, and it would kind of make them need to draft or sign a guy. They'll probably just keep Douglas so that they don't have to do that, which, here we go again. I don't think Roddy will get cut. I think there's like 0% chance that happens unless he basically punches the new coach in the face or something, which I guess is possible with Roddy, but it ain't going to happen.
I don't see that as possible with Roddy. Roddy's not the angry kind of guy. He's more like the, hey, we're going to play. All right. Like, Roddy's more laid back than anything.
That's true. That's true.
He might complain on Twitter, and they hate that, but they can't take away his Twitter account.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. He would probably complain on Twitter as opposed
to. Man, why we got to have Hugh Jackson back? He's going to bust my ass again. Like, that would be his kind of response. Like, man, I can't get away with anything anymore. Like, that would be his response.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I think that's about it as far as people that are probably that might get cut. I don't think Blaylock will get cut this year. A good guard, an above average guard. What was he, top 25 guard this year?
I would say he was a little bit higher than that.
Okay.
But you're asking pro football.
Yeah.
The PFF ranking. Let me see. Let me pull it up real quick because they're a bookmark like they always are. All right, he was 25th and Asamoah was 27th.
Okay. Yeah, so
between them, they look better.
Yeah, especially given our offensive line issues, I would think the chances that Blaylock gets cut is pretty low. Next year, it probably increases a lot, but this year I think he's pretty safe.
Well, that's because next year I think he's heading into the last year of his deal. Let me pull it up. Yeah, he'd be heading into the last year of his deal. He'd be someone you could save $6.1 million by cutting. This is the year you draft a guy in the 4th round, teach him how to play left guard, and cut Blaylock after this year. Or you say, hey, we're going to cut you. Do you want to retire?
Yeah. And if people are curious, the reason why Corey Bierman is not a cut because he's a free agent, so they won't have to cut him. They'll just let him walk.
With OC. Bye-bye. So long. Farewell. Whatever. Get out.
A lot of free agents for the Falcons this offseason.
Croy, go back to Montana. If you want to sign with the Seattle Seahawks, no one is going to stop you, except for maybe the Seattle Seahawks. So, bye-bye.
Yeah, T.J. Yates, Jacquizz Rodgers, Anton Smith, Eric Weems, Barrett Pasco, O.C. Croy, Cliff Matthews, Corey Peters, Sean Weatherspoon, Mike Johnson, Gabe Karimi, Jonathan Scott, Robert McClain, Josh Wilson, Charles Godfrey, Javier Arenas, Dwight Lowry, and Matt Bryant are all unrestricted free agents this offseason.
And of that, I think there's 5 names that you're really worried about re-signing. The rest, you give them a minimum offer, and you're like, hey, you take the minimum or you don't come back. And the 5 guys, I think, are Corey Peters, depending on the scheme. And if you cut Tyson Jackson, you bring Peters back because Peters definitely showed he was better than Tyson Jackson. I think
Definitely.
John Witherspoon on a unique prove-it deal.
Yeah,
Here's how I think you should do it. You should do it as $2 million base salary, and then $3 million in per game active roster bonuses. Because if he plays all 16 games, he gets paid $5 million. But no matter what happens, he only counts $2 million to the cap.
I like that idea. Yeah, I think you'll see him get a 1 year something $1 million deal to basically prove that he can stay healthy for at least most of the next year, and then he can earn a long-term contract next year. But
And
yeah,
then you got Robert McClain, who I think if you give him a 3 year, like $6 million Pac-Man Jones type deal to be that fourth guy, depth at corner, depth at special teams, just that defensive back, that veteran guy, I think that would be a cheap contract for him. And then your boy Dwight Lowery, which I'm giving you 100% credit for.
all right, thank you.
3 years, about 9.5 million. You know, hey, the first year you get all of that guaranteed. And then after that, you know, basically if you show you're still worth that starting spot, we'll keep you in it until you show you're not. And I think by the time he shows he's not, Desmond Southard will be ready.
Yeah, yeah. And worst case scenario, Lowry is the perfect dime safety. So even if you basically have like a $3 million dime safety, that's not a bad thing in today's NFL.
Oh
And
yeah.
the fifth guy is Matt Bryant.
Oh yeah, the fifth guy's Matt Bryant, but come on, let's be honest here. You take a dump truck, you fill it with money, and you drive it right down to his house,
Okay,
and you just go, hey, where should I drop this off?
I like that. What about Quiz or Anton? Do you think one or both of those guys should be back?
I think offer them a minimum deal, and then see what they snap at. If Quiz takes 1.2 million to re-sign, do it. If Anton takes 1.3 million to re-sign, do it. Like it's to me, if they're gonna ask for less than 1% of the cap, they're worth it. And with the cap at 140 plus million next year, I'd be more than happy to pay one of them 1.4 million. Whoever snaps at the money first gets it.
Okay. All right. Well, there you have it. I hope that answered your question, Ben Cruz. That's our show for tonight. People, be sure to tweet your mailbag questions to us. You can use the hashtag Falcons Mailbag. Send it to either me at FalcFans or Scott at Scott Karasik or the show's Twitter handle at FalconsPFC. Um, be sure to follow PF Central on Twitter as well. Next week, we will be probably talking about more coaching stuff, even though there's probably a greater likelihood that we may be actually talking about the Falcons coach. But yeah, that's what will be on deck next week. And I guess we can start gearing up for the Senior Bowl too, Scott, right?
Yeah, I'll be down in Mobile this year. Got my credentials and everything.
All right. I'll
So
be pulling the fort down here.
I think Senior Bowl week we might end up skipping a week just because I'll be busy as hell.
Sure.
But on the 27th, I'll let you know all my findings.
Okay. All right. That's our show. Good night.